Hello students, you all are welcome in this session. In the previous session, we were discussing a few data-based questions based on magnification. So, I hope the formula is clear to all of you now. And I gave certain questions for homework, which were question number 3 onwards. So, we will discuss these questions as well now. So, let's start with question number 3. So the magnification of human cheek cell from a compound microscope is 2000x. So magnification is 2000x. Calculate the length of a 20 micrometer scale bar on the image. So now this is the magnification and this is the actual size. So 20 micrometer scale bar magnification, if you want to find out then what will be the size of it. So let's just check out. The formula was magnification is equal to size of image upon actual size of object, right? So here we have got the magnification already. The magnification is 2000, so I'll write 2000 here. Then size of image we have to find out here. So then the lower thing, the actual size of object, it's been told it's 20 micrometer. So then this upon 20, right? So this is the size of image. So if actual size of the object is 20 micrometers, what will be the size of image? Here we have to find out. So this will be equal to size of image will be equal to 2000 into 20. So that will be equal to 40,000 micrometers. 40,000 micrometers, or we can also write it as 40 millimeters, right? So both of the answers will be correct. So 40 millimeters in the scale bar will actually show a 20 micrometer size. Fine. So I hope it is clear now that how can we actually relate things here. So this is question number 3, part A. Okay, so let's continue with part B now. Determine the maximum length of the cheek cell. So how will we determine the maximum length of the cheek cell? So here we can, using a scale, we can see what is the length of this cheek cell, and then we can actually find out the actual length of the specimen here, right? We have already got the magnification. We can find the size of this cheek cell inside the image using a scale. So using that we can find out the actual size of the cell, right? Again, the same formula we will use. Magnification is equal to size of image size upon actual size. So here we have to find out the actual size. Image size we can find out using a scale, and magnification we already have here, right? So what we will do is, here how will we find it out? So here the image size is 24, approximately 24 millimeters, and upon, so if I take actual size there and magnification here, so then actual size will be equal to 24 upon magnification is 2000x. So this will be somewhere around 0.012 0.012 millimeters, right? Because this was 24 millimeter, so 0.012 millimeters, and we can convert it into micrometers by multiplying it with 1000. So that will be 12 micrometers. Okay, so the actual size of this particular specimen is approximately 12 micrometers, we can say. Fine, so this is question number 3, part B. Now let's see the next question. The next question is, using the width of hen's egg as a guide, estimate the actual length of ostrich egg in the figure 14. All right, so here we have hen's egg and this is ostrich egg. So here we have to actually do the comparison. So we can find out the length of the hen egg and ostrich egg using a scale in this picture, and the same ratio will be the actual sizes. So that way we can actually find the actual length of this ostrich egg. All right, so how will we solve it? So suppose if I say if I'm taking out the ratio of both of them. So question number 4, part A. So if I'm taking out the ratio of both of them, so then how will we find out? So first of all, I'll using a scale, I'll find out the length of this hen egg and this ostrich egg. So we'll get a ratio here. So first of all, if you'll measure the hen's egg is approximately 9 millimeter wide, and the ostrich egg is somewhere around 25 millimeters in length. Okay, so in the diagram we can see that. Now we can actually find out the hen's egg length. So generally the hen's egg in actual, if we see in the reality, if you ever see a hen's egg and see the length of it, it's approximately 50 millimeters in length. So now we can correlate all these things. So now how will we find out? So suppose for example, if I'm putting ostrich egg upon hen's egg, so here if I am putting it as the actual size upon its actual size, the same ratio we will get from the images also. Okay, so ostrich egg image size upon here it is hen's egg image size. So we'll put the values here. Okay, we'll go to the next page. So ostrich egg actual size we have to actually find out. This thing we have to find out. And hen's egg actual size is 50 millimeters. Ostrich egg image size is 25 millimeters, and hen's egg image size is 9 millimeters. So we'll put all that in this ratio formula that we have just made. So ostrich egg upon hen's egg in image is 25 upon 9, right? 25 upon 9 millimeters. So this is the size of ostrich egg in the image, size of hen's egg in the image, and here ostrich egg size we have to find out actual size of ostrich egg upon actual size of hen's egg is approximately 50 millimeters. So if I want to find out this one, so the next step will be 25 upon 9, and this 50 will come here, so into 50. So if we'll do the calculations, you can find out the size of it, which is approximately 139 millimeters. Okay, so this is how we can find out using the ratios. Now the next part of this question, estimate the magnification of the image. So we can find out the magnification of the image because we already have the actual size and the image size. Using that we can find out the magnification using our formula, which is magnification is equal to image size upon actual size, right? So if we consider the hen's egg, then magnification will be equal to image size was 9 millimeter and actual size is somewhere around 50 millimeters. So we can find out using this. So the ratio is coming out to be somewhere around 0.18x, right? So this is the magnification. So this is how we can find out things here. So the magnification is very small here. It's not very large magnification, but still the image has been magnified. The image is actually smaller than it actually is, the object actually is. All right, so now coming to the next question here. So Caenorhabdis elegans has been widely used as a model organism in research. Most adults are hermaphrodite and have exactly 959 cells. So now this is one interesting term. What is a hermaphrodite? Hermaphrodite is an organism which has properties of both male as well as female. So the one which is half male and half female is a hermaphrodite. Okay, and it has 959 cells. So measure the maximum width and total length of the worm in eyepiece units. So we can actually measure the size. So first of all, see here, these are the eyepiece units. So in this we can see certain lines. So if you measure, basically if you measure the whole thing, so you will find that approximately 10 millimeters is covering approximately 12 eyepiece units. So using this reference we can solve our question here. So let's see what is the first question. Measure the maximum width and total length of the worm in the eyepiece. So let's just find it out. Okay, so we will find it out in micrometers, because here in the third question, convert the dimensions from micrometers to millimeters. So to solve this question out, so we should already find our answers in micrometers so that we can convert it into millimeters then. So we have to find out answers in micrometers. So if 10 millimeters is equal to 12 EPUs, so then if we are taking 10 millimeters into consideration, in that case the we can say the magnification will be equal to, so if we are using it as a millimeters, so we'll convert millimeters into micrometers first. So question number 5, part A. So here we can see 10 millimeters is equals to 12 EPU. So that will be equal to 10,000 micrometers will be equal to 12 EPU, right? So here we will put the image size, that is 10,000 micrometers upon 12 EPU, that will be equal to the magnification. So if we solve it out, then what is the magnification here? It is approximately 833x. Okay. So this is somewhere around 833x here. So the worm's length here, worm's length is given to be 75 millimeter if we measure it using a tape, and its width of worm is equal to 5 millimeter approximately. So if we want to find out the maximum length, if we want to find out the actual maximum length, in that case we already have magnification, and this is in millimeters, so we will convert it into micrometers. So this is the size of the image upon magnification was how much? 833x. So we will solve it out, and the answer will be somewhere around 90 EPU. So the actual size, the maximum length is somewhere around 90 EPUs. And if you want to find out the maximum width here, so to find out the maximum width, we will use this 5 millimeter, and we want to convert it into micrometer. Then see, if we multiply it with 1000, then this will be 75,000 micrometers. If we multiply it with 1000, we will have 5,000 micrometers. So I'll take 5,000 upon this magnification 833. So basically the formula was magnification is equal to image size upon actual size. So here we have the actual size, the maximum width, actual, you can say the actual maximum width, which was down here, and magnification was here. So accordingly we have put it in the formula. This is the actual maximum length. So if we solve this one out, so this is somewhere around 6 EPUs. Okay, so I hope it is clear to you now. Now actual maximum width, now this is, we have found out in EPUs. If you want to find out this thing in the next question, let's see, 1 unit in scale indicates 9.5 micrometers. That means 1 EPU is equal to 9.5 micrometers. So calculate the actual dimensions of the worm in micrometers. So here we have found the answer in EPUs. Now we can convert it into micrometers. So let's see here. So the maximum length in EPUs was 90. So maximum length is equal to how many EPUs? 90. So 90 EPUs multiplied by 9.5 micrometer, because 1 EPU is equal to 9.5 micrometer. So we will solve it out, and maximum width we can also find out. So maximum width that we got here was 6 EPU. So 6 multiplied by 9.5 micrometers. So if we solve it out, we will get the maximum length and maximum width here. So the multiplication, so this will be somewhere around 57 micrometers, and this is somewhere around, you can say that, okay, sorry, I've done it reverse. So 90 into 9.5. So this is somewhere around 855 micrometers, and this thing will be 57 micrometers. So maximum width will be 57 micrometer and maximum length will be 855 micrometers. So let's see the next question now. What is the next part? So this was question number 5th B. And now let's see question number 5th C. Convert the dimensions from micrometers to millimeters. Now again we have to convert them from micrometers to millimeters. So to convert micrometers into millimeters, we have to divide them by 1000. So question number 5 part C. So maximum length, that was 855 micrometers. So to convert it into millimeters, we will divide it with 855 divided by 1000. So this is 855. So this will be 0.855 millimeters. So that will be the maximum length, and maximum width will be equal to, so it was 57 micrometers. So we will divide 57 micrometers by 1000. So this will be equal to 0.057 millimeters. Okay, so I hope the question is clear now, that how do we find out the magnification or image size or the actual size. Whatever is given to you, you can find out the third thing using the same formula. All right, so here we are done with the questions. Now let's come to developments in microscopy. So how microscopy was developed? So it was first invented in the 17th century, and since then several technological developments have been made into microscopy. So the light microscope, the first microscope that was invented was the light microscope. Now we have a lot of improved light microscopes, and in the second half of 19th century, discovery of bacteria and unicellular organisms became possible because of these microscopes. So this is the earlier microscope that was actually used by Leeuwenhoek. Okay, so this is Leeuwenhoek's microscope. uh, so this was developed in somewhere around 1670, and today Zeiss microscope, which is a brand, so it will look like somewhere like this one. Okay, so today's microscopes are very advanced when compared to earlier microscope. Now chromosomes were seen first time the process of mitosis and meiosis, because that time the chromosomes get condensed actually. Otherwise in the nucleus the DNA material is open like this, while when it reaches the cell division phases, it becomes very properly seen into these condensed structures. So we can actually see all of the chromosomes separately during the cell division. So the chromosomes can be best studied during the cell division, mitosis or meiosis, and also during gamete formation and fertilization. So more advanced microscopes reveal the complexity of organs, such as, so different types of cells and their functioning could be studied using these microscopes. Kidney and presence of mitochondria, chloroplast and other structures in cell were studied because of use of these microscopes. So now at magnification more than 400x, it becomes increasingly difficult to produce a focused image with a light microscope. Why does this happen? Because the light has wider or broader wavelengths. So the wavelength of light, they are like this. So because of which a very clear picture cannot be received after a certain magnification. So the resolution is clarity. So there are two things that you will study in microscopy. One is resolution, so that is connected with the clarity. Okay, and second thing is magnification. So magnification is related to the you can say the size, how many times you're increasing the size. So that is related to increase in size of the object. how many times, like how many x, like here if you're increasing it up to 400x, then resolution after magnifying it up to 400x times, okay, the resolution becomes unclear. So the picture that we get is not very clear, it is a blurred image. That is because the light has larger wavelengths, so because of which a clear picture cannot be received. So here an example is given. For example, these dots at 30 point, we can clearly see them separately. At 20 points, and after slowly decreasing the size of it, see here at one point we can hardly see the dots. But if we decrease the size even more, then you won't be able to differentiate that these are different dots or it's a single line. So that is how the resolution actually decreases with the size decrease in the object, okay, whatever object we want to see. So that is how the requirement of even better microscopes came into picture, and development of electron microscope was done. So image is a pair of dots that appears close together to become smaller. Eventually it will be impossible to see them as separate dots. So that is why this problem was overcome by development of microscope that use beams of electrons. So now electrons wavelength is actually very small when compared to light. So if the light wavelength is like this, then the electrons wavelength will be very less compared to this. So here we can see a better resolution when compared to a light microscope. So that is why electron microscopes came into existence. The wavelength of electron is much shorter than the wavelength of visible light. The first electron microscope were designed and constructed in Germany during 1930s. They came into use in research laboratories in 1940s and 1950s. Some electron microscopes can magnify up to 1 million times. So 10 to the power 6x is the resolution of electron microscopes, while so here it is given, we can see here. So resolution of unaided eyes. So without using any lens, your eyes can see objects up to a size of 0.1 millimeter, or you can say 100 micrometer, or you can say 1 lakh nanometer. This size molecules you can see. Okay, but light microscopes, using a light microscope, we can see objects of size 0.0002 millimeters or 0.2 micrometers or 200 nanometers size. Okay, electron microscopes, you can see objects which are even more smaller. So just as I told you, 10 to the power 6x is their resolution. So accordingly you can see. So we can see size objects that are of the size 1 nanometer. What is 1 nanometer? 1 nanometer is equal to 10 to the power minus 9 meters. Okay, so this is 1 nanometer. So they are actually very small, right? So I hope the resolution and magnification things, both of them, are clear to you. So making the separate parts of an object distinguishable by eyes is called as resolution. Okay, so table 3 shows maximum resolution of unaided eye and light microscope and electron microscope. They use 3 different SI size units. So what are the 3 different SI size units? They are millimeters, micrometers and nanometers. So I already told the numbers for these. Like for example, we can revise it here. So 1 millimeter is equal to 10 to the power, so, or we can write it in this way: 1 meter is equal to 1000 millimeters, 1 millimeter is equal to 1000 micrometers, and 1 micrometer is equal to 1000 nanometers. So I hope this is clear here. All right, so let's go ahead. Because electron microscopes have better resolution. Why do they have better resolution? Because electrons have a very smaller wavelength when compared to the visible light. They can give much higher magnification. This means much smaller structures can be seen when compared to a light microscope. Electron microscopes have allowed scientists to investigate detailed structures, ultra structure of the cell. Now the variation in ultra structure between different cell types are described later. So these we will study later on. Okay, so electron microscopes might have a lot of advantages, that we can see molecules of even smaller size or structures of even smaller size, right? Better resolution of pictures, but there are certain disadvantages also. What are the disadvantages? First disadvantages, they give black and white images. Okay, and so if you want to add color, you have to add it manually, artificially later on after taking the picture. The method used to prepare material for electron microscope, it always kills the cell. So unlike light microscopy, electron microscopy always kills the cell that we want to see under an electron microscope. What are the reasons? The first reason is vacuum. Vacuum is used to see these particular objects, and second of all, the beam of electrons, they are very destructive, so they actually disrupt the cell. So while compared to light microscope, in light microscope actually we can see live cells, live materials, and produce images in color. We can see colored images as well, but we cannot get very high resolution. So both of the microscopes, they have their own pros and cons. So now coming to next one, that is fluorescent stains and immunofluorescence. So what are fluorescent stains? So fluorescence is something in which if we give a light to certain material, it reflects the light back, it gives the light back, it re-emits with a even longer wavelength. So that is how we can see the objects very clearly here. Most of the chemicals in the cell are white or colorless, so that is why we have to stain them, just like we discussed earlier. Stains used in microscopy are colored substances that bind to some chemicals but not the others. So these are very specific stains that will bind particularly to certain materials. Just like we discussed, methylene blue, which actually binds to the negatively charged molecules, for example DNA and RNA. That is why the nucleus will be very dark in color when compared to the other cytoplasm or different organelles. Fluorescence is when substance absorbs light and then re-emits at a longer wavelength. Fluorescent stains have been used for over 100 years. Some absorb ultraviolet light and re-emits it as a blue light. For example, special fluorescence microscopes have been designed and built with intense light source such as high power LEDs or lasers that emit single wavelength. So that is how we can see these objects very clearly. This light is absorbed and re-emitted by the sample, generating particularly bright images. So here, immunofluorescence is another term. So if the fluorescence is connected with the term immuno, we can understand that all the molecules that we are going to stain here are related to the immune system of our body. So now immunofluorescence is very deeply worked on, because here we have certain proteins like antibodies and antigens. They have property of specific binding to each other. So if we, for example here, if we want to find out that whether certain you can say a virus has infected a cell or not, so the virus will have these antigens. Okay, so these antigens will be spread out in all the cells if this particular virus has attacked certain cell. So in that case, if we will add an antibody that will specifically bind to this antigen, and if this antibody is already tagged with these fluorescent stains, and if it goes and binds to this antigen, and if after washing off also this will not go, so in that case we can see, if we then put the specific light onto it, then it will re-emit light with even greater wavelength, and we can see whether the antigen is present or not. So we will get results from this. So that is how immunofluorescence is developed using the fluorescent staining. Antibodies that bind to particular antigens of the cell are produced, and these fluorescent markers of different color are linked to these antibodies. Multicolored fluorescent image can be produced showing where the chemicals are located. So wherever the antigen will be bound with the antibody, we will get a fluorescent color back from the sample. So here very interesting image we can see here. So this is very interesting image. So this is the image produced by immunofluorescence. DNA in the nuclei is stained cyan. So here the blue, light blue color, the cyan color are the nucleus. Okay, and microtubules, proteins of the cytoskeleton, which are normally invisible, are stained magenta. So the whole cell outer wall, inside the wall, a lot of microtubule proteins will be present. The whole cytoskeleton of the cell is stained magenta here. So we can see very interesting image where the central part, which is light blue, is the nucleus, and outside we can see the cytoskeleton, which is stained magenta in color. So this image was produced using a camera, custom laser scanning microscope. Okay, in this figure, secondary antibody was used. So here one primary antibody, which is directly binding with the antigen, that was stained, that was actually labeled with this fluorescent stain. Here we can see the antigen, to the antigen a primary antibody will bind, to this primary antibody another secondary antibody, which is actually tagged with this fluorescent stain binds, and then we can see the result. Again the same way we will get a result, a color re-emission we can see from this sample. That means that the antigen is present in the sample. So that was the fluorescent microscopy. So using the properties of these fluorescent dyes, we can actually find out that whether certain sample has an antigen or not, or certain parts of a cell can be stained using these fluorescent dyes, and we can get even better images. So the next one is freeze fracture electron microscopy. So just as the name is suggesting, freeze fracture electron microscopy. So the technique is used to produce images of the surface within the cell. The sample is plunged into liquefied propene at 190 minus 190 degrees Celsius. So at this degree Celsius, the cell is frozen, which is rapidly frozen first, and then a steel blade is used to fracture the frozen sample. The fracture goes through the weakest point in the cells, and from there the cell divides into half, or certain parts of the cell, they actually are removed. And after the fractured surface is removed by vaporization to enhance the texture of the surface, this is called etching. So etching is done to make a clear surface on the top, and after that a vapor of platinum or carbon is fired on the fractured surface, on this surface. So first of all the cell is fractured, then the cell is etched. So you can see that some part is even more removed so that these organelles can properly come out, and we can see even better image. So after etching, we will spray certain platinum and carbon vapors onto the cell. So after spraying these vapors, we can actually get a structure like this, and we will remove out this structure, and we will study that what all organelles have made this structure. So on this basis, we can find out that which organelles are present. So the outer, these different shapes that have come out, we can study them, and study the structure of the cell like this. So the replica is removed from the frozen sample. So this replica is removed from the frozen sample and can be examined using electron microscope. It is about 2 nanometers thick on an average, but the thickness varies because the angle at which coating is applied. This gives an impression of 3D image through shadowing. So the weakest point in cell is usually mid of the membranes, between the two phospholipid layers. The freeze fracture process gives a unique image of the part of the cell. These images were first produced, they led to fundamental change in theories about membrane structures. So the membrane structures were detailed, studied in detail using these methods. So here we can see the structure using a freeze fracture method. So here the outer, this thing is a plasma membrane, this is a vacuole. So due to etching, we can see a groove, a down groove is observed in this cell. So that happened because of the etching process. So this is the cytoplasm, this is a lipid droplet. So lipid droplet, because it is not bound with any outer membrane, so that is why it is also broken down from between. What else can we see here? So this is a scale of 0.2 micrometer. So we can see a lot of organelles here. This is the outer wall of this cell. This is the plasma membrane. So we can see the vacuole and certain more organelles have been, like this organelle has gone out, this organelle, all of them have been removed. This is also a small organelle. Here also we can see a small organelle or certain protein structure here. So this is how the structure was studied in detail using the freeze fracture method. The next method is cryogenic electron microscopy. So cryogenic means if we are if we are freezing something to a very minus temperatures, that is cryogeny. Okay, so this technique is often called cryo electron microscopy. It uses structure of proteins particularly. So using protein structures can be studied using this particular method. A thin layer of pure protein solution is applied to a grid, and the solution is flash frozen to create a smooth vitreous ice and prevent the formation of water crystals. The liquid ethene just above the melting point of minus 182.6 degrees Celsius is generally used as a coolant for this particular cryogenic electron microscopy. Now the grid with frozen protein solution is placed on the electron microscope. So after the frozen protein, the proteins have been frozen, they are kept under the microscope, and detectors record the pattern of electrons transmitted by the individual protein molecules. Now because this process is being done very suddenly, so all of the proteins will be in different structures, they'll be oriented in different structures. So different patterns of these proteins can be studied, and we can see all the patterns that are possible with that protein. So these patterns are combined to produce a 3D image of the protein molecules. So a very interesting example has been given here. So previous method for analyzing protein structure only produced images of a protein. So if we study one protein structure, then it will give image of just one protein structure. But what are the other possible orientations of this protein that could not be studied using the simple protein structure? So here in cryo electron microscopy, the protein that insist in time when the water around them froze, this allows scientists to research protein that changes from one form to another as they carry out their function. So they have been actually frozen during the time when they were into action, and in different stages they actually got froze. So we can see all the stages, what might be the possible stages or what might be the possible structures of that protein in different orientation that could be studied here. So this is one interesting protein structure which certain bacteria actually use to kill other bacteria which are present around them, because other bacteria are utilizing the resources, the food that this particular bacteria might use later on. So in that case, what this bacteria does, it actually produces certain proteins which actually kills the other bacteria which are present around it. So it's a very interesting concept, and these particular proteins are called as pyosine. So it is a protein produced by bacteria to kill other bacteria by bursting their cell wall and membrane. So using the cryo-electron microscopy image, pyosine pre-concentration and post-contraction. So pre-contraction and post-contraction, both of the images were captured because suddenly these proteins were frozen. So certain particular proteins were in relaxed state, certain of them they were in contracted stage. So they all could be studied all together. So here just see this particular image. So just a minute. So here we can see, so this is the pyosine structure. So pre-contraction, the relaxed stage, and post-contraction. So here we can see it is contracted, and this is the internal structure of it. So let's just see the elaborate structure of this particular, just, yeah. So if we see the particular structure of this, here we can see this is the whole protein. It has a base plate, a small base plate, and a trunk and a collar. So this base plate, or you can see the trunk. So this inner part is the trunk actually. So here it gets contracted. So this particular over, so it is like a spring inside a refill pen that you might have ever seen. So the spring can actually contract up to the top, while the refill will stay like this. On the refill it can actually move, the spring can move. So it is like a spring which has been pushed on the upper side, and here it is the relaxed spring on the refill, you can say. So this is how we can see it and how it functions actually. So first of all, the pyosine molecule will come and it will attach to the other bacteria that are present around. Suppose for example, this is one bacteria and it doesn't want other bacteria to live around it. So it will produce pyosine proteins and they will send to other bacterial membrane. So for example, if this is the second bacteria which it actually wants to kill, so then the pyosine will go and attach to the second bacterial membrane, and then it will insert its tail fiber around it. Okay, so first of all it is attached to the membrane, and after that contraction will take place, and the this particular tail will enter inside the other bacteria and it will disrupt the membrane of this bacteria so that it will get killed later on. So this is how interesting protein structure was studied because of this cryo electron microscopy procedure. So students, that is all, I guess. Microscopy, certain things we have learned, and we will continue with the structure of different cells, their different parts, their cell structures in prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and what are the differences. So that we will cover in the next class. So that is all for today, and I hope the topic is clear to you all, and bye bye for today.